This is the Revoltage podcast. Today we'll be talking about UFC 214, and I'm going to weigh in on my predictions on who I think is going to win on the main card. This is a great night of fights, by the way. A huge stacked card, and let's just jump right into it. So we'll start with Maia and Ozdemir. I don't know who that other guy is, so I'm just going to go with Maia on this one. The guy's a beast. He's been really doing a lot in that division already, so I'm just going to give it to him because I'm not going to bet on some guy that I have no idea who he is. Lawler and Cerrone. Man, this is going to be an amazing fight. These are two dudes that are just known for being complete savages in the ring. Cerrone is very technical, has a Muay Thai background, underrated jiu-jitsu, so well-rounded, has moved up in weight and has looked really good once he moved up. He's coming off a loss, if I remember right, and I think that he's going to end up really coming through again, because really he loses his real high-profile fights. If he's fighting for a championship or a number one contender or something like that, that's usually where he ends up slipping. But in this fight, he's already kind of had his bad performance in his last fight, so I think he'll come out looking good. Robbie Lawler's coming off a loss, brutal knockout by the champ, Woodley. He lost his belt there. I kind of saw that one coming. I didn't want to admit it, but he just takes too much damage in his fights, and the last few fights he's had has really been wars. And so I felt like it was only a matter of time before he took a shot that he couldn't bounce back from, and Cerrone is not a guy that you want to get hit by. So Lawler, his fighting style is very much brawling based. You know, he's semi-technical, but he likes to just get in there and just throw down any way that he can. That'll be interesting how it stacks up to Cerrone's real technical precision. He's also a good wrestler, so I think he can use his wrestling to defend Cerrone's takedowns and jiu-jitsu attempts and really keep this fight standing. I think that if it goes to the ground, Cerrone has the jiu-jitsu skills to beat him. If it's standing, I think it's kind of a coin toss. I think if I had to put my money on either of them, man, I'm going to go with Cerrone for this one. Lawler's had like a year off. Cerrone's coming off a tough loss, so I think Cerrone's going to come in with something to say. That being said, I think Cerrone's going to keep his head up like he always does. He doesn't do a whole lot of head movement, and if he gets blasted by one of Robbie's huge punches, he could have a rough night. But I think that Cerrone will catch him with, a jab or, a nice slick combo and put Lawler on his butt and then finish him out with a TKO. Let's see. That being said, I would not be surprised at all if Lawler smashes Cerrone with a big overhand right or a big hook. All right, Cyborg and Tonya Evinger. Does anybody think Evinger even has a chance? Let's be honest here. She's huge as far as anybody that's kept up with the women's division. She's been fighting for a while, Evinger. But I think that Cyborg is just, I don't know any woman in mixed martial arts right now that can beat Cyborg. Evinger is a gamer. She's got, a lot of ground skill, if I remember right. Her stand-up is pretty weak in comparison to Cyborg. If she was fighting anybody else, I'd say she has a good chance, but just nobody has even gotten close to finishing Cyborg. So I think Cyborg wins this one. I think she's just going to rush across the ring. I think she's going to drop Evinger. Evinger's probably going to try to tie her up because nobody wants to really stand and strike with Cyborg. But I think Cyborg is just going to throw Evinger around when she tries to clinch up and take her down and end up being on the receiving ends of some of those Cyborg bombs that are really going to tear her up. So I've got Cyborg on this one. Let's say round 1, last minute TKO. Tyron Woodley versus Demian Maia. Man, this is going to be a fun one to talk about because this makes me feel like we're going old school back to UFC 1 where you've got a clash of styles as opposed to these well-rounded martial artists. You've got Woodley, who has a good wrestling background, but he doesn't really use it. He uses it more just to keep the fight standing, and he's got cement fists. The guy is a knockout artist, huge bombs in his hands. He's knocked out Robbie Lawler. He dang near killed Wonderboy in his fight, and literally just one of the most brutal attacks I've seen in the ring that somebody's ever survived. I don't know how Wonderboy survived. I literally think he was just running on pure heart at that point, but he looked good. And that was their first fight. Their second fight was pretty weak, but Woodley, I still think, if I remember, he dropped him or kind of had an upper hand on him. That was a terrible, terrible, terrible fight. One of the worst fights I've seen in a long time. I know a lot of people will say that it was a super technical fight and everything like that, and I agree. I know that they were sitting back and just playing a game of chess and being really thoughtful and technical and not overcommitting to anything and giving the other opponent openings. But at the same time, neither of them really pulled the trigger to try to go for the finish, except for I think Woodley once, if I remember, once or twice. So that was a really weak performance from both of them. But it'll be really interesting to see how Woodley matches up with Maia. Maia is a jiu-jitsu freak. The guy is probably the best in the UFC when it comes to jiu-jitsu. I mean, he's very traditional, terrible takedowns. All he does is he'll throw wild looping punches so he can grab onto you and then take you down any way he can and then just ride you like a backpack. Seriously, this guy is a monster on the ground, and this is really interesting because Woodley will not want to go to the ground at all. Woodley does not want to test Maia's submission skills because Maia can submit anybody, literally anybody in the entire UFC at any given time. He can submit them. I say that, at least in his division. Whereas Woodley can knock out anybody in the division. So very clearly, Maia's goal here is going to take him down and try to submit him. Maia is very comfortable with taking somebody down and, working for the submission, but he's not going to let him up if he doesn't feel like that submission is capable. He will ride somebody for 5 minutes and then go out the next round, take him back down and do it over again 3 to 5 times in a row. He's fine with that. Maia has a pretty tough chin if I remember right. He's been knocked out a couple times. I know Marquardt has knocked out both of these guys. Marquardt laid out Maia in one of the most brutal knockouts I've seen, where Maia threw kind of a weak kick, kind of dropped his head, wasn't really expecting Marquardt to fire back, and he just face planted when Marquardt beat him to the punch. Something that can very much happen with Woodley across from him. I think Woodley will want to explode and kind of exploit Maia's weak, kind of slow, sloppy striking with his explosiveness. Now, the thing is, Woodley needs to make sure he doesn't go in and overcommit, because if he doesn't knock Maia out completely, Maia can grab onto him, latch onto him, and slap on a submission if he goes for a TKO finish on the ground. So I expect Woodley to really go for kind of a one-punch knockout here, power punches. I think he has enough room to throw some combinations. Probably not going to see a lot of kicks, but I think he can throw some combinations because I think Maia will be slow enough to keep Woodley just active. So who do I think is going to win that fight? I'm going to go with Woodley on this one. I'm not a big fan of Woodley. I feel like he dodged a lot of fights for a long time waiting for his shot when a lot of other people were working their butts off to get to the championship fights, and he sat back complaining while everybody else did. So I'm not a big fan of Woodley. He's not always the most entertaining fighter, but that being said, I think that he's got what it takes to beat Maia on the feet before Maia can get him on the ground, because every round starts on the feet. So that means throughout this fight, even if it goes to decision, Maia is going to have to take down Woodley 5 times. And Woodley is a good enough wrestler and athletic enough and fast enough that I think that he's going to see those shots coming, and he's going to sprawl out, and he's going to avoid those takedowns and finish Maia with a heavy punch, probably in the second round. I think Maia will get 1-2 takedowns maybe, but I don't see Woodley being on the ground this whole fight. Now the big fight. This is one that people have been just clamoring for years, and finally, I almost don't believe this fight is going to happen until it happens live, just because Jon Jones is a complete mess and finds new ways of kicking himself out of the championship contention. But I think he's finally going to hold it together enough for at least this one fight. Do I think he's a changed man? No. Do I think he feels bad for what he does? No. I don't see a person that's remorseful. I don't see somebody who, sticks to the perception that he was at least trying to give off back in the day. I think he's still a piece of trash. But do I think he's the greatest fighter in the UFC? Probably. It's really hard for me to say that there's anyone that can match his level of wrestling and his striking and his creativeness and his awareness and his IQ. I mean, the guy's brilliant in the ring, and he can make adjustments on the fly. He can come back. He's been in trouble a couple times. I believe DC kind of wobbled him a little bit in their last fight, but the guy's an animal. And it's sad to say because I think he could be a huge ambassador for the sport just because of how great and technically he is. And I think he could have gone down as one of the greatest of all time, bar none. But his antics outside the ring were such a damper on his career that he will never live up to his full potential. I mean, we're talking like McGregor levels of popularity had he not done coke, or not got that DUI, or not done a hit and run with a pregnant woman, or not got busted for steroids. I mean, like, the list just goes on and on and on and on, and he's really running out of new ways to keep him out of the UFC. But I think that apparently he's got 9 lives here in the UFC, and I think that he better make the most of it this run, because I think if he messes up again, I don't think that the general public is going to give him any more slack. So, that being said, Jon Jones is so well-rounded, but Daniel Cormier, on the other hand, is probably second to Jon Jones. And that's the thing, is a lot of people count Cormier out when they're talking about the best in the division and the best in the UFC, because Jon Jones is that good. If Jon Jones is out of the picture, people will be clamoring for DC to be one of the best of all time. But he's always going to be in the shadow of Jon Jones until he beats him. He's 19-1. And his one sole loss is to Jon Jones. And ironically enough, Jon Jones is 22-1, and his sole loss is to, yep, that's right, Jon Jones. Jon Jones was fighting Matt Hamill, and through some illegal elbows, you can't go from 12-6 straight down, and end up getting himself disqualified. So literally Jon Jones has beaten himself. He's lost the title a couple times because of his ring or outside the ring antics. And so really Jon Jones is Jon Jones' biggest enemy. Daniel Cormier is, his high profile arch nemesis or whatever, but I think that Jon Jones has to worry about himself more than he has to worry about Daniel Cormier here. I think that Jon Jones can beat Daniel Cormier. I think it's Jon Jones' fight to lose, but I think that Cormier has a good chance at winning here. But I think that Jon Jones has already proven that he's beat him once. That being said, this is an interesting idea. So in their last fight, I want to say shortly after USADA was brought in, Jon Jones has already popped for performance-enhancing drugs, and we all know his excuse. He can't get it up, so he had to take some pills. But that seems to me like a cop-out. I think that, that's something that anybody can say, but it doesn't matter, because it looks to me like he has a blemish on his record because he has performance-enhancing drugs in your system. Who's to say that he wasn't taking that stuff in all his other fights, unintentionally reaping the benefits of it? You look at the Oven State Prue fight, Jon Jones looked like he was slow. He looked like he wasn't the guy he used to be. So I think that Jon Jones is really going to look slow in this fight. So it's going to be hard to compare the last fight to this one. I think that Jon Jones is a little more creative and technical than Daniel Cormier, but Daniel Cormier is very straightforward in his fights. I mean, he doesn't throw the crazy looping, spinning elbows. He doesn't do capoeira kicks or anything like that. Nothing flashy. He just kind of goes out there and puts on a good show. Good wrestler, good striker, heavy hands. But something I think is underrated about DC is his ability to take a punch. The guy took the best of Rumble twice in 2 different fights. Nobody gets punched like he does from Rumble and gets up from it. Rumble's a dude that sends people to the shadow realm when he puts his hands on you, and DC got up. Yeah, he got scrambled for a little bit, but he came back and won those fights. So do I see Jon Jones knocking Cormier out? I think it's possible, but I would be really surprised. I think that if he does, Jon Jones is going to have to hit him with something that is totally creative and out of nowhere. Spinning, one of those little up elbows that he likes to do. I think that he's going to have to catch him with something crafty. Even more so, though, I think that Cormier could knock out Jon Jones. I think that Cormier has 25 minutes to knock out Jon Jones, as long as he can, keep his head movement down. And I think that if he catches him with one, he can put Jon away. I really believe that. Do I think it's going to happen? Man, I don't know. This is the hardest fight on the card to call. I'm going to say Cormier comes out on top. And I say that's a pretty bold prediction, but only because Jon Jones has had some ring rust. He's been out of the ring for a year. He's got so much going on outside the ring that finally I have a feeling that he's going to go into this fight mentally weak. And I think DC is in a really good place. coming off that fight with Rumble and overcoming that adversity. I think DC's in a good place. I think DC is also extremely motivated. I think Jon Jones is showing up because that's just what Jon Jones does. He just kind of shows up to fights. If he really cared about his career, he would quit doing all the stuff he does outside of it. There are still rumors that he hasn't cleaned up his act. Cerrone kind of hinted at it in a, kind of tongue-in-cheek moment on, I think, some podcast. So I think DC, he's the current champ. Jon Jones is going to be fighting for the belt. I think that DC is going to try to keep standing, look to knock him out. I think that DC will take him down a couple times, but I think that Jon Jones is good enough on the ground that DC should probably just look for that one punch, because DC is an Olympic wrestler. That's how good Jon Jones is here. I'm saying an Olympic wrestler is going to want to stand with Jon Jones, but I think that his chance is to catch him with that one punch, because I think if he doesn't, I think that Jon Jones grinds out a decision if it goes. So I think DC is going to have to stop Jon Jones. And I think DC's best chance at stopping Jon is with just that one knockout punch. So yeah, I'm going to go with DC on this one. That's the hardest one because it's so close. But yeah, those are my predictions. We're going to see how this night goes. The good thing is it's going to be an amazing fight no matter who wins. Let's see how it goes tonight. Let's go, guys.